of if anymore, but when you're moving out, I said when you're moving out.
That means it's time for our weekly confab with Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoint, wirepoints.org. Ted, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Were you as shocked to learn as we were? Now, this is not a representative sample, but it was sort of interesting. The state that Illinoisans most hate, according to one sample set, Indiana and not Illinois, when more than half the state wants to leave.
No, I didn't see that. So people want to leave Indiana? Is that what you're saying?
No. The question was which state you hate the most, and for Illinois residents, the winner was the state they hate the most is Indiana next door, and not the state they live in, which is the state they want to leave.
Well, that's fascinating. You know, I remember I came back to the Chicago area 14 years ago, and I remember right when I got here, nobody wanted to move to Indiana. It's like, forget it, man. We're not going there. Yep. Well, if you look at all the data, you see how many people are going to Indiana today, and it's Indiana's a big winner, net winner of people from Illinois, and it's a lot more affordable there. You got school choice. Taxes are far lower, so that's an interesting stat you're giving me.
And gas, I just guessed up there, $2.
Yeah, gas is a lot cheaper.
$2.80.
No, it's a lot of people that move there, and we've talked to a lot of companies whose employees have moved there, and they said they didn't want to go, but once they saw they could buy a bigger house, bigger lot, school choice, a good job opportunity, and everything was cheaper, forget it. So.
All right, so this week IDPH. Or at the end of last week, I guess, CDC issued their guidance for reopening of schools, and more or less Illinois Department of Public Health cut and pasted the CDC guidance. And now school districts have to make decisions. You see school districts in places like New York and L.A. going more draconian than the CDC advised, requiring mask wearing for the students in schools unless they have a note from Epstein's mom. And in Illinois, it's segregation, sort of mask wearing for 2 years old and up if you're not vaccinated, no mask wearing if you are vaccinated. But this is still going to be a school district by school district decision.
Well, I think there's a little bit of silver lining there. The recommendations from the CDC they're recommended, right? So they're not required. And I know what you mean, but that opens up the door. Imagine if it said required, we'd be in a different boat.
We'd be.
So it says recommended, which opens up the door, and I can see a lot of parents they'll be pushing to say no masks, and it's going to be a pretty big fight, as we've talked about before. I've been in touch with lots of people who are pushing back. The question is, what kind of resolve will some of the school districts have? And I think it'll open up the door to some districts saying we're not going to have masks, and it'll put pressure on the others that do want to have masks to defend that position.
Yeah, and I remember you were going to sit down with the superintendent of your district there, New Trier, District 203. Was he made any final decisions about masks yet?
They had not made any final decisions. I did have a conversation. He asked that I keep it off the record, so I'll keep it off the record. But you'll note I did put out a note about our district and what we think the policy should be: no masks, no outing out of the unvaccinated, no tracking of students, and that note's been out there. And I think it's in line with what a lot of board members want. The question is going to be, what do the unions do? How much push do they make? And then, of course, do the board members buckle or not?
Do you get the sense that people know this? All of those geniuses that live on the North Shore by you and are members of the school board, members of the New Trier administration, the greatest school that has ever been constructed, as I understand it. This is, again, this piece in New York Magazine out yesterday. David Wallace Wells, a man of the left. The kids are all right. Per the CDC, among children, the mortality risk from COVID-19 lower than the flu. The risk of severe disease or hospitalization about the same. This is also true of the much worried over Delta variant, his words, almost dripping with sarcasm. It's also true for all the other variants and for the original strain. Most remarkably, it has been known to be true since the very earliest days of the pandemic. Indeed, it was among the very first things we did know about the disease. The preliminary mortality data from China was very clear. To children, COVID-19 represented a vanishingly tiny threat of death, hospitalization or severe disease. Is that the posture of the people that you talk to on the school board or the administration or your residents on the North Shore, your neighbors on the North Shore? Is that their understanding?
It's not. Look, I will tell you this, Dan, just for a quick one. I see lots of people who oppose the masks because they finally get that fact. But, of course, the other half or whatever it is, or the other 60%, whatever size they are, no, they don't understand that, or they ignore that. And, it was known, China was a dangerous thing to compare to because we never know what they tell. I think Italy was the big one, right? We had lots of news from Italy at the start where 90% of everything was people, 60 and 70 and older. And it was a clear message we got from day one, but it's been ignored. It continues to be ignored. One of the stats we put out at Wirepoint the other day was that you've had more deaths in a year from cancer, from accidents, from homicides, each individually, than from COVID. Right? We had 10 total deaths in Illinois from COVID for ages 17 and younger. We had something like 57 cancer deaths and 100 homicides. The numbers from other things overwhelmed the deaths from COVID. If we took the kind of precautions that we're taking on COVID, we'd just shut down schools totally.
Is there any legal means parents can take if they try to mask up our kids this fall, and if our kids have been vaccinated, and also to stop this testing during school? I mean, they were going to have SEIU members at CPS or SEIU members do the up-the-nose tests, but now the kids can do it themselves at school.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is that there's if I guess it depends where, right? And I think Chicago is going to be different than the rest. Chicago is probably going to have all kinds of controls and testing and all that. I think other places are just going to dump testing out with the vaccinations. Also, I think it depends on vaccination levels. You've got some of the North Shore areas heavily vaccinated. You've got some of the South Cook areas not vaccinated very much. So I think there's going to be a big difference. But it's hard for me to understand the lawsuit area. When I talk around with different lawyers and different groups, it's hard to find the case just because nobody seems to trust the courts. Even if it goes to the state courts, forget it. You're going to get turned over. So
there is a case that may make its way to the Supreme Court over the mask mandate.
Really?
We'll see about that. But I wanted to get something out. Getting beyond COVID. So for most people, look, they're sheep. The kids are going to go back to school whether they're masked or unmasked. Okay. So when they get back to school, then they're going to be indoctrinated. They're going to be sexualized with this new Sodom and Gomorrah curriculum that Gore Vidal would blush at. And they're going to be taught that if they're white, they're oppressor. If they're black or brown, they're the oppressed, and all the critical race theory, and read Ibram Kendi's latest book and so forth. So what about that? What is the conversation there for when Rainbow Dildo Butt Monkey that we were just talking about across the pond in the UK comes to the Wilmette Public Library, or maybe you have another I Hate White People race seminar day at New Trier? What about that conversation?
Well, you're hitting it right on the spot. Look, last night's board meeting at New Trier, and I know this is happening around other places, 3 things dominated. 3 things: CRT, masks, and there's a required book for 10th graders that contains explicit sex that parents don't want. Those 3 things were debated. Forget merit, forget performance, forget property taxes, forget how well our kids are learning, what the stats are on reading and math. Forget all that. We've gone all the way to stuff that is totally, what do you want to call it? CRT, masks, and explicit sexual books. It's gone crazy, and I think what we saw is parents who were there, Dan Namey, parents who were there to oppose that stuff, and I think it was without a movement. I think that people are starting to figure it out on their own that they don't want to see that. So it's good news that people are showing up and speaking up, even if they're not being part of some movement against it. But it's going to take a lot more than that to stop it.
Well, and part of this is, too, because this has gotten the imprimatur of the state through that, teaching sexualization of children and race hustling legislation that was passed that's going to be part of teacher training starting this summer.
Yeah, this is it. You got to wonder how this stuff ever gets unwound. I as I've said before on this show, the pendulum is swinging, very extremely, and it's still swinging to the extreme. But I argue it's going to hit something where people go, wait, this is way too much, and we're waiting for that moment. However, how does all this stuff get unwound is a big question for me, because they're codifying so much of this stuff, and it's going to be really hard to have a legislature that unwinds all this stuff. Right? That's going to be the big challenge, I think, for the people who don't want to see all this CRT, who don't want to see all this sexualization in schools. It's going to be a big challenge.
And is there any way for parents to opt out?
Well, they're making it hard for opt-outs. It's I think that's the other big thing that has to happen. But it'll create chaos in schools, right? Because everybody will be, half of the school will be opting out and half the school will be opting in. And I think what we should do is actually different, Amy. I think it should be opt-ins. If people want the things that are extreme, let them opt in, but let the rest of the people not have the extreme stuff.
By the way, that Supreme Court case on potential Supreme Court case, this is a guy who sued a bunch of airlines over the fast mask mandate and is appealing his case to the Supreme Court. So it's limited, but perhaps the court will weigh in on masks. But by that time, I don't know, we'll be wearing masks for the climate apocalypse or something. I wanted to get to something else you posted at wirepoints.org, to a little comparison shopping, since a lot of Illinois residents are doing that, and will continue to do that, comparison shopping, plotting their exit, and states that are taking advantage of the federal largesse to rethink, right-size their state and local governments versus states like Illinois that are just using this to prop up a system that is unsustainable long term.
Well, yeah, it's amazing, right? So, here in Illinois, we're bragging about the fact that we didn't get downgraded to junk. That was our big accomplishment, and of course, they're thanking themselves for all the great work they did at the legislature, when in fact it was the bailout that stopped the downgrades. But the other states, are in much better position, right? They had reserves. They're getting money that they didn't need, and so they're going to be smart about it. They're cutting taxes. Wisconsin's doing a big tax cut. Arizona is trying to flatten their progressive tax. Ohio is doing the same with some cutting of income tax rates. So they're doing the things that are making life easier for their residents and more, just better. We're not doing any of that. We're not cutting taxes. We're raising taxes. We're not doing anything about property taxes. Those are all going up automatically every year. So we're making life difficult in Illinois, whereas our neighboring states and other competing states are making life easier for the residents, as it should be.
There was this interesting paper by the Boston Fed that was out this week, or perhaps the end of last week. And this is against the backdrop of Joe Biden's edict on capitalism, and talk about, capitalism can't exist without competition. What he's really talking about is kleptocracy, with 10% set aside for the big guy, of course. But this stat, because all of the talk is inequality, wealth inequality, the greatest wealth concentration since the Gilded Age, and so on and so forth. We always sort of pay no mind to a burgeoning middle income distribution, a burgeoning upper middle income cohort. 1 in 4 Americans, this paper finds, 1 in 4 Americans between the ages of 40 and 49 is a millionaire, if you include their household net worth and the present value of their retirement benefits. Now, that can be a little misleading, because, you can't access, your Social Security benefits, for example, right now, so it's not a liquid asset. But if you include the net worth of the house and your present value of their retirement benefits, 25% of Americans in their 40s are millionaires. That is a tribute to capitalism, not government, and it should be showing the way forward, as so many in our political class, both here in Illinois and, of course, at the federal level, are preaching the virtues of socialism.
Yeah, they want it both ways. Lightfoot talking about the crime problem, kind of to come back to this, is, she said there's a sense of urgency about the crime problem, but she said, but the best and most effective solution is to create jobs. And she's right about that. Sadly, though, none of her policies, move toward creating more jobs. If anything, she's chasing the jobs out. So, they want it both ways, and they want to be able to say both things, but they can't have it that way.
He is Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Ted, thanks as always for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Making sure your aging loved ones are safe and sound is so important, especially